Welcome to Sharp End. This week in Wales, we've heard fresh doubts about the wisdom of subsidising students to go to universities in other parts of the United Kingdom. In Scotland, it's all been about the wisdom of the country leaving or staying in the United Kingdom. I've been talking to Plaid Cymru's leader about the difficulty of making independence a simple yes or no choice.
Of course, not all the questions can be answered. Not all of the questions are within the gift of the Scottish Government or people in Scotland themselves.
Does that include whether Scotland can keep the pound or not? The Scottish First Minister has ignored the Welsh First Minister's warnings. And more on those student subsidies in a moment. But first, my guests tonight are the Conservative MEP for Wales, Kay Swinburne, Plaid Cymru MP, Jonathan Edwards, and Labour MP, Chris Evans. Let's have a quick comment on Scotland first. We'll be talking about it throughout the programme. If they vote for independence, Chris Evans, should the Scots be allowed to keep the pound?
I think if you look at the white paper that's been published, I think it's more of an SNP manifesto and a constitutional document. I didn't expect to see Doctor Who EastEnders in something about talking about the future of the British Constitution. I believe that what is being brought about is just cherry-picking the best of the things they like. And
such as the pound.
Such as the pound, the Bank of England, which is still connects Scotland to the UK economy. So you're looking at Devo Max, really, than full independence,
okay.
I think.
In a word, then, do you think they should be able to keep the pound?
No.
Jonathan Edwards, I think you disagree.
Well, a host of jobs in Wales and England are reliant upon trading with Scotland, so it would be lunacy to kick Scotland out of the sterling zone if they decided to keep that currency. And I thought...
Lunacy or otherwise, do you think they will be allowed to keep it?
Well, it's in the interests of England and Wales for that to happen, and it was a very strange intervention by the First Minister. He made it appear as if he had a veto over monetary policy. The Bank of England is completely independent from government. I don't think he knows the difference between monetary and fiscal policy, and a more nuanced approach by the First Minister would have been, he should have gone up there and said we need reform of the sterling zone. Now that we're having fiscal powers in Wales, the Governor of the Bank of England should be meeting Welsh ministers and being scrutinised by the Finance Committee.
There'll be plenty of time to expand on these issues later. Kay Swinburne, on the issue of the currency and the pound, do you think an independent Scotland should keep the pound?
I happened to be at the Bank of England this week meeting with the Deputy Governor, and we were talking about the Eurozone crisis and the fallout of the Eurozone, as opposed to the fallout of what might happen if there were to be a currency union anew with an independent Scotland with sterling. So all of the hazards of the Eurozone, all of the hazards of a single currency with very different economies really need to be taken into account. And I really am very, very sceptical that a currency union works without actually fiscal union. All
right, OK. Hold your thoughts. There will be a chance to get back to that in just a moment. But first, though, we'll come back to talking about Scotland and all those issues related later. But first, people who run our universities say they're facing serious problems, and they claim that's because of the way that they're funded by the Welsh Government. They say a combination of budget cuts and the effects of subsidising the bulk of tuition fees for students is leading to uncertainty and making it difficult to invest enough to be able to compete with universities elsewhere in the UK. Here's Owain Phillips.
Nathan's a final year history student at Bristol University. He says he decided to come here because the course was right for him, although he did consider institutions within Wales.
The course in Bristol I found was more varied and more interesting for the type of history that I was interested in myself. But I think that the beauty of going to an English university is that you can pick up skills that you perhaps wouldn't pick up in a Welsh university, and you can then actually bring them back to Wales.
The Welsh Government pay the bulk of his fees, and Nathan says without that help, he would have had to seriously consider if he'd have come here at all.
If we then had to pay £9,000, I think it would have quite a detrimental effect on the outlook of most Welsh students in terms of going to an English university. So, for example, like an English university may have a more varied course, even perhaps be more respected in a certain subject, and the Welsh student would have to sacrifice that because of the financial issues that would be at hand as well.
Welsh students who come here across the border to places like Bristol to study pay £3,500 in fees, the same as if they choose to study within Wales. This costs the Welsh Government £50 million a year. And yesterday, university bosses told the Assembly's Finance Committee this is having a big impact on their budgets.
Scotland funds its students fully, provided they stay within Scotland. Northern Ireland funds them partially, but again does not fund them if they go outside Northern Ireland. And that really is the biggest issue that we have in Wales is the affordability of funding students who go outside of Wales.
We probably need to look at more progressive models that are currently in place. But it's a debate that all political parties in Wales need to have if we're going to be serious about widening access for our students, but also dealing with issues that are coming down the line now with regard to the support that's available for part-time students, because I think the nature of university education in itself may be changing.
But student representatives say funding should follow the student, adding they have little sympathy with the Vice-Chancellor's concerns.
There's a part of me that is almost slightly unforgiving towards institutions that asked for a rise in fees and then didn't, I think, haven't quite necessarily prepared for what will then be a significant expectation raise.
But one Tory on the committee says they've been warning for some time funding those students who cross the border cannot continue.
We've taken evidence now over the last few weeks from Vice-Chancellors and indeed other higher education institutions who have made it absolutely clear now that the Welsh Government's current tuition fee policy is unsustainable in the future.
The Welsh Government have launched a review into the policy, but says Wales receives far more income from English students who come here than it pays out to those Welsh students studying over the border. Back in Bristol, Welsh students emphasise the focus should be on the education, wherever they choose to study.
Case Swinburne is a thorny issue. It's caused problems for UK government and Welsh government on tuition fees. What do you think about the situation as it stands in Wales, and is it the result of coalition government policy, the coalition government decision to bump up the fees to £9,000?
I don't think it is at all. I think it's a decision by the Welsh Government to fully fund Welsh students wherever they go. And that's completely against what everybody else has done throughout the rest of the United Kingdom. And so there's a real concern here that this is not being costed correctly, and certainly the auditors have also expressed some concern that the costings are not correct on this. But the real problem I've got here is that actually it's not encouraging those students from a disadvantaged family to actually go to university any more than it did before. And so we need to really look at how we get the resources to them to actually fully fund them rather than funding all students across Wales and outside of Wales.
Jonathan Edwards, is Plaid Cymru having a rethink about its support for this policy? Because the evidence, I mean, Case Swinburne may have been hinting at that, but the evidence is that actually in England those high fees aren't putting off pupils from applying from disadvantaged backgrounds. They realise they have to pay them back afterwards.
Well, I think that's the key issue. Once we decided that we were going to fund students wherever they decided to study, our budgetary policy on higher education was being determined by policy in England. And I think there are two key considerations we need to look at now as we move forward. Firstly, how do we offer the biggest support possible to our own students? And secondly, how do we ensure that the Welsh pound is spent in Welsh institutions? At the moment, we're subsidising institutions outside Wales.
So you'd cut that funding off for students leaving Wales?
Well, I prefer to go back to the original policy, but that's an issue of a debate within the party. I think it's cynical that the Welsh Government are having a review which won't report till after the election. We should be having this debate on a policy platform at the next election.
Chris Evans, is the problem that the Labour Welsh Government has cut universities' budget as well as introducing that uncertainty because now the funds follow the student?
I think Hugh Lewis has said that the policy is sustainable for the term of this Assembly.
Do you think it is?
Yes, it is. It's proven sustainable and it's popular. That's what the Minister is telling us, and I believe him. I think we need to have a wider issue. There needs to be a wider debate on this. The university sector has gone and undergone so much change in the last couple of years, and I think what we need to be talking about is producing graduates who have the skills that business needs. And I think universities, Welsh universities, have to look at the courses they provide.
Do you think in the long term that Labour will back the idea of students paying their whole fees?
I think what we've got to look at, there's a review at the moment that's ongoing. I think that I'm quite encouraged. We've got to wait for the review. I mean, and what I'm encouraged with is other parties can get involved in it, and I think that they should send representatives to the review panel. And
Jonathan Edwards, we talked about applied rethink. Do you think that will be the outcome of the rethink, that students will be expected to shoulder that full burden?
Well, I think the feeling I'm having within Plaid Cymru circles is that we will return to the original policy of funding Welsh students for studying within Welsh institutions, and that means that we're investing in our own institutions, and I think that's the way forward for us.
Case Swinburne, do either of those solutions sound like the solution that you'd like to see?
Well, for us, we need to concentrate on those students who come from less well-off backgrounds, encouraging them to their university education. But it was interesting this week, I had people from Higher Education Wales in Brussels with me promoting their access to the research fund, and there's obviously a massive research fund in Brussels that they can access. They're looking for alternative pots of money that they can now get to try and bring back to Wales to actually make up the deficit that they're actually finding through their student funding.
All right, thank you very much. We'll pause there and turn to other matters. Well, matters we were talking about before, to be honest. The Welsh Secretary, David Jones, has tonight given his reaction to the Scottish Government's proposals for independence. Like Alex Salmond, he says Scotland can have an economy unimpeded by borders and customs with a strong common currency. The difference, of course, is that whilst the Scottish First Minister claimed that a yes vote wouldn't mean giving up the pound or leaving the European Union, the Secretary of State said that a no vote was required. But it seems that these are the issues on which the future of the United Kingdom will be decided. This week was when Alex Salmond promised he'd answer the questions about how independence would work for Scotland. And he says that he has, including on the crucial issue of how Scottish banknotes would still be backed by the Bank of England.
Sterling is our currency. We're going to keep the pound. We're entitled to keep the pound. And this is a very important aspect because it's part of the assets of this country to which we're entitled to a share.
But our First Minister says Wales could derail a currency union. We could refuse to share the pound, Carwyn Jones claimed last week. And this week, a UK Cabinet Minister was on hand in the Senedd to agree with him. On the question of a currency union, the First Minister, as you know, has said that he would want a veto over that on behalf of Wales. Would he be in his rights to expect that veto?
Well, I think the whole of the rest of the United Kingdom will want to take a view, and if the situation, God forbid, should ever arise, of course it's very much a matter of the rest of the United Kingdom, but I really struggle to see that England, Wales and Northern Ireland would simply say, that's fine, we'll have a currency union if Scotland were to vote for independence. I think the Scots need to understand that whilst the SNP may claim they can carry on using the pound, that is very far from certain.
At the very least, the Scottish National Party has left every other party in Britain responding to its agenda. But Plaid Cymru's leader is hiding any jealousy. Leanne Wood was supporting Alex Salmond's arguments when I asked her about his white paper. Now that the Scottish White Paper has been published, critics say there is still uncertainty, there are still unanswered questions. That shows how risky an enterprise independence is, doesn't it?
There's been a very comprehensive report produced. The White Paper covers many, many questions. Of course, not all the questions can be answered. Not all of the questions are within the gift of the Scottish Government or people in Scotland themselves. But what has been produced is a serious document, and I think that it will provide many answers for people in Scotland as part of this ongoing debate.
But if even after 670 pages in the greatest minds of the SNP and the Scottish Government, there are still those unanswered questions, that shows that there is still a lot of risk, a lot of uncertainty in the whole idea of Scotland going independent.
But there are many unanswered questions about if Scotland votes no as well, and there are some things that won't be able to be resolved until after the referendum has taken place.
Doesn't it underline for you just how far behind Wales is in terms of this sort of debate and an outcome that ultimately you'd want to see?
Well, Wales and Scotland are different countries and our devolution settlements are different settlements. But what I see in Wales is results from polls and conversations with people which tell me that there is a demand for greater powers, for an extension of our devolution settlement.
Greater powers, but certainly not independence. Those same polls have been stubborn, haven't they? 9%, 10% on a good day.
At this point in time, there isn't the same level of appetite to go to the ultimate aim as there is in Scotland. But things change, and things can change very quickly.
Even opponents are saying that, yes, Scotland could be independent if it wanted. It could stand on its own 2 feet. That couldn't possibly be true of Wales, is it? When you think of how low the tax take is, it's £5,400 per head, and yet £9,700 per head is spent in Wales. Well, Wales just couldn't stand on its own 2 feet.
Well, I reject that notion. Wales, of course, Wales can stand on its own 2 feet.
Not with that gap.
Our problem is the economy, and we need to do everything that we can to turn around our economic problems. But to say we can't and to say that we never could is deeply unambitious. Okay. And I think we need to be able to raise our sights and aim for the best possible economic performance that we possibly can.
But that ambition could only mean either raise taxes or huge cuts in public service spending.
Not necessarily. If you have powers over taxation, then that enables you to borrow, for example. If you had powers over taxation, then any jobs that you created, you would see the income from that. So as long as you increase the number of people in work and paying into the tax pot, you don't need to change tax rates at all. But it would be very foolish, I think, for us at this stage, years ahead of seeing powers over income tax, and there are many steps to go through before we see those, a referendum, there's this lockstep problem, to come out and say where we would cut or raise taxes. We have no idea what the Welsh economy will look like by 2020, and it's looking increasingly unlikely that we'll have those income tax powers much before that time.
Is there also a political lesson for you as a leader of Plaid Cymru that Plaid needs to be bolder, as the SNP has, about independence and actually start shouting about it more?
Well, we have been clear that we want to maximise the powers for Wales, but it's a question for me about why we want those powers, and we need to be able to demonstrate to people at all times that it's not a case of constitutional change for the sake of it. We don't want powers so that we can be bigger and better politicians. It is absolutely not about that. It is about having the tools to be able to do the job of making life as pleasant as possible for people here in Wales. And it's clear that the more control and the more input you have over the decisions that affect your country, the better decisions that are going to be made.
But hasn't the SNP's success in government and getting to this point been based on appealing to both heart and head and being completely open about it? It's not called it a long-term aim or an aspiration. It's people know where the SNP have stood, haven't they?
And people know where Plaid Cymru stand as well.
They've been confused suddenly over the years because you've had a consistent message since you've been leader, but different leaders have had different messages and people haven't been certain where Plaid stands on independence.
It's true to say that Plaid Cymru has emphasised different aspects of our programme at different points in time. But I've been absolutely clear since I've become the leader of Plaid Cymru, this party's central and core aim is to achieve an independent Wales. We have a long way to go before we get there, but I see every incremental step being a journey towards that. And the point about the poverty that we have in Wales, I don't accept that our poverty is inevitable, and I don't accept that there's anything about people in Wales that makes us inferior and unable to overcome our economic problems. Our problem is not having control over the tools that enable us to shape the economy, and that is why I believe we're in the situation that we're in with such a poor and declining economy.
Could you put a date on when Wales would be independent?
What we have said is that we will go as far and as fast as the people of Wales want to go. It's clear at this stage people want more devolution, and I'm happy for people to come on this journey with us. To put a date on the Welsh independence project at this point in time is not possible to do. But
in our lifetime?
What happens in Scotland will determine a lot on this, I think, because if Scotland does vote yes in 2014 and becomes a successful country, then people in Wales will look to that success and I believe want some of that success for ourselves. And it'll be very interesting to see how things develop in Scotland and how the debate in Wales develops in parallel to that. But what's absolutely clear, after September 2014, things in the United Kingdom will not be the same again. It could be that the United Kingdom is no more, and where we go as a country within that context is something that we need to be talking about now, I think.
Leanne Wood, thank you very much. Well, we will talk about it now. Jonathan Edwards, has Plaid missed the boat politically? The chances that the SNP seized over the last few years, has Plaid missed those opportunities?
Well, I think they're in the position they are in now due to the electoral success that they've had. Greater electoral success than us, obviously. And I think the white paper, I think, will change the dynamic of the independence debate, because...
I'll just stick with that political point, because, I mean, history shows us that the SNP got into government at an early stage and built from there. Is that the mistake?
Well, they were a minority government, of course, on their own. They had the post of First Minister. We decided, in the interests of the nation, to win the referendum on getting sovereignty on the devolved fields.
And was that then the mistake that you didn't go for that?
Well,
I know it's ancient history in some way, but...
I strongly supported the deal that we did at the time, because it wasn't about putting the party first, it was about putting the nation first, and that was the only way we could have that referendum and win it, and I think history will judge us correctly for taking the decision that we did.
OK. OK. You raised the white paper. I'll come back to you on that in a moment. And the white paper now changes everything, doesn't it, Kay Swinburne? Is Leanne Wood right to say that whatever the outcome, after 2014, the UK will be different?
Actually, I think it's already different. The announcements we made with Silk and following up on the Silk Commission have already changed things once again. And I think the entire constitution of the United Kingdom is in transition and will continue to evolve over the coming years. I, like Chris, thought that this was more of a Devo Max type document. It really wasn't about independence. It was about keeping everything they wanted. And it's really quite difficult to see how you can keep things like the currency but have no control over it. You've got no control over your economic levers if you actually have a currency where you don't even sit on the monetary policy board.
They have no control over the currency now, though.
Well, they do, in actual fact, because they're part of the United Kingdom. And so
no, there's no control.
Ultimately, there is a real issue here about them keeping the issues for the economy of the UK together. And so we need to be very, very careful about this. That was a very good manifesto. There were things in there they could do right now. They don't have to have independence to improve their childcare, improve their adult social care, which are all in that 677 pages.
Chris Evans, do you think that, do you agree with Leanne Wood, that whatever the outcome, yes, no, Devo Max, independence, whatever, that everything changes next year?
I think at the end of the day, the SNP want the penny in the bun. They want to say they're independent, yet they want the safety net of the currency and also the Bank of England. I think the huge problem is we still don't have an idea of what Scotland is going to look like post-independence.
Or even in that 670 pages document?
No, and once the toothpaste is out the tube, you can't be put back in. I think what I've read of the document in terms of things like negotiating the share of the national debt, and also a Scottish Army and also the currency and the Bank of England is very dependent on negotiations with the UK government.
And isn't that the problem, Jonathan Edwards, that, as I said to Leanne Wood, 670 pages, the greatest minds of the SNP and the Scottish Government putting their attention into it, there's still lots of unanswered questions.
Well, that document clearly puts a vision of a more socially just society at the heart of it. And that's the key.
That's the sort of manifesto, isn't it?
That's why it changes the debate, agent, because now the No campaign are going to have to say, what does a no vote mean? Is it going to be the Tory manifesto for the 2015 Westminster election? And essentially now the people of Scotland have got a choice between a more socially just future or a neoliberal future, whatever the party is.
Isn't that the mistake that both SNP and Plaid are making in talking, essentially setting out a manifesto rather than talking about the structures of the country, the flags, the armies, that sort of thing?
Well, I think that there's plenty of answers in that document on those key issues. But the key point about the white paper is that it sets that different vision for the future. Now the No campaign have to respond. What does a no vote mean?
OK. Chris Evans?
But it's not a constitutional document. That's the argument I've got. And if you read some of what's come out, it's an SNP government will increase the retirement age to 66, increase the pension age. These are the type of things like Kay say they can do now. It's not actually setting up a constitutional settlement.
Quick final word from you then, Kay Swinburne.
This all puts huge uncertainty, but I think it's right that the people of Scotland actually decide. I wish everybody who was Scottish living in the rest of the United Kingdom also had a vote. I happen to be married to a Scotsman. He would dearly like to have a vote on his country's future independence, even though he doesn't live there. There are some big issues here, I think, that we need to resolve. But ultimately, I think they're better as part of the union, and I really hope they stay.
Thank you all very much. We'll be talking about this again, I'm sure, but that's it for tonight. The conversation continues on Twitter, where I'm at AdrianMasters84. Thanks to my guests. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.